are about to view an interview with Dr. Philip Dow, author of Virtuous Minds and Superintendent of the Rosslyn Academy, Nairobi, Kenya. Dr. Dow will be the keynote presenter at the 2017 Christians in Teaching Conference.
Philip, you are known in Australia primarily as the author of Virtuous Minds. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your family, how you came to be the superintendent of the Rosslyn Academy in Nairobi?
Yeah, first a little bit about myself. I'm a third culture kid, TCK, which means that I've spent the majority of my life outside of my passport country. I was born in Ethiopia and spent a considerable time in Kenya, the UK, Canada, and of course the United States. So not the most important thing about me, but something that does help define who I am. I'm married to Catherine, who've been married for about 14 years now. She's from the UK, and we have two daughters, Emma, who's 10, and Sophie, who's 7. And both attended Rosslyn Academy, and it's a thrill for me to be a part of the school that they are being trained in and growing up in. So. How did I become superintendent at Rosslyn Academy? That's a long story. The short answer is I was in the right place at the right time. I was teaching at Rosslyn for a number of years and had an opportunity to pursue a PhD. In the course of the PhD, I was here doing research in Kenya, and the school had an administrative turnover, and they asked if I would come on for a short term while they did a search. During that time, the school and I found the fit to be better than any of us had expected, and it's been a professionally, personally rich experience, far more than I had expected.
Was there something in particular that prompted you to explore the subject of intellectual virtues?
Yeah, so there's two ways I could approach this question. One is relationally. One of my best friends from way back is a guy named Jason Bear. He's a philosopher of virtue epistemology, which is a fancy way of saying intellectual character. He was one of the first philosophers to look into this in a significant way, and his conversations with me when I was teaching were significant in shaping my own perspective on this issue. In fact, it was listening to him and being a sounding board for him where I first saw the connection between what I was doing in the classroom and what he was doing on a philosophical level. And I said this was the thing that connected for me a lot of dots in terms of my own ultimate aim of education. What did I want to see in my students? What was ultimately the goal for them? And I came to the conclusion that the ultimate goal was I wanted to help reshape who they were as thinkers, to become virtuous people, not just to have content and skills, but to actually become a new type of thinker, a virtuous thinker.
Just out of interest, why did you call these things courage, carefulness, tenacity, fair-mindedness, curiosity, honesty, and humility virtues? Indeed, intellectual virtues rather than values or qualities.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Again, a short answer to a potentially long answer, and that is virtue. The term virtue has a theological, historical richness that the terms qualities and values don't have. It's connected with classical and Christian thought and tradition of character being linked to moral and intellectual ends. So there's a richness that situates what I'm doing and what others who are involved in this movement are doing, that situates that in a rich theological context that's very important to me and adds, I think, additional weight to what we're doing.
What would you say to someone who has not read The Virtuous Minds and that the 7 virtues are simply another attempt to impose a Western mindset on education?
Well, I think I would turn the question around and I would ask, find for me a culture that does not value courage, fair-mindedness, honesty, tenacity, and so on. And if you find that, then we can have a conversation about whether it's Western or Eastern. But I think if you go to any culture, East, West, North, South, these are virtues, these are character traits that are admired, that are applauded. To greater and lesser degrees, of course, but these are essentially universal. I think this is what C.S. Lewis talked about when he talked about the Tao, in that there are certain universal characteristics that exist across cultures, even if they look different in different cultures. They exist. And so if they find that one of these virtues are not praised in another culture, then we can have that conversation. But until then, I think it's pretty safe to say that these are universal.
Has it been your experience that the 7 intellectual virtues can be warmly welcomed, not just by people of Christian faith, but by people of any faith or no faith?
Yeah, and this is a build on the previous question. In my experience, the virtues, the intellectual virtues, resonate strongly with secular audiences and audiences of other religions. I'll give you a couple examples. University of Birmingham has a Jubilee Center, which is a center of education in the UK, and they are stressing intellectual virtue or intellectual character as one of their key principles. And it resonates across the board. Same thing with the Intellectual Virtues Academy in Long Beach, California. It's a secular public charter school. Most of the parents sending their kids to that school are from a non-Christian background, but yet they see something rich and meaningful and valuable that they want in their kids, and that is the development of intellectual character, and it resonates with them regardless. Now, as a Christian, it's particularly meaningful to me as I seek to, in my own life and in the lives of my students and those who are a part of Rosslyn Academy, to seek to love God with all of our minds. And to me, intellectual character brings substance and connections in that pursuit that haven't existed in Christian education, that, in my experience, in as meaningful a way.
No doubt Rosslyn Academy is implementing these intellectual virtues. What difference do you think that has made to the Academy?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways that it's impacted what Roslyn's doing, but I think the most obvious and significant is it's changed the conversation about what education is about, from external goals like grades and skills to an internal conversation about who our students are becoming as thinkers and as people. So we're much more interested, just by talking about the common language of the virtues, courage, fair-mindedness, humility, etc. Just by talking about those, the conversation gets shifted from is it going to get them an A, or to how are they developing as thinkers, the process of learning as opposed to the outcomes of learning. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't care about the outcomes. We care a great deal about them. But by pursuing development of the process of learning, by putting our focus on that, we are assuming that the other aims of education are going to be a natural byproduct, and that has been the case in our experience. So shifting the focus from external objectives to internal objectives, from external motivation to internal motivation, from grades to character, has been significant for our teachers. It's changed the way that they've looked at education, and for our parents, who now are asking different questions, and questions that I think are ultimately more in line with an exciting pursuit of learning for its own sake, not just for what the practical outcomes will be in life.
Great. We have one more question for you.
Yes.
Who do you think has the better rugby team, the Wallabies or the All Blacks?
I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to answer that question in this context.
Okay, thank you. We look forward to seeing you in April next year.
Is that it? That's the last question? Okay.
For more information about Anglican EdComm, go to edcomm.org.au. Anglican EdComm, promoting biblically shaped education.